The town of Greyhaven had always told the same quiet legend. A prince, once beloved, vanished into the stone shadow of the old tower on the hill and never left. Mothers told it to hush children at dusk. Hunters paused at the tower's silhouette and crossed themselves. It had the taste of something half-believed, the kind of story towns settle into because it is safer to believe ghosts than to pry at the past. Lena Varro had no patience for old town comforts. She ran the tiny newsroom on Main Street, a narrow room where the radiator hissed and the clock always read 5 past. Her paper, the Greyhaven Ledger, could not live on weather reports and pancake sale adverts. Lena chased threads, unpaid debts, crooked landlords, secrets others called inconvenient. When the council hired a new archivist and a crate of old court documents arrived at the town hall, Lena smelled a story. The crate was damp, its brass hinges crusted with time. Among brittle ledgers and petitions, she found a set of letters that had never been catalogued, a string of terse, coded notes between someone called R and the royal warden, dated the year the prince disappeared. They referenced a confinement and a list of supplies, cobbler's wax, a night lamp, and a ledger entry, one living witness, secure. For a week Lena sat with the letters, turning the paper like a relic. The phrasing was odd, intimate even. The notes suggested not a murder, not a plunder, but a deliberate hiding. The warden had marked dates and initials. There was a name tucked under a seal, LOI. The prince's middle name, Lena remembered from a tattered yearbook in the museum. She published a front-page column. New evidence suggests a hidden confinement. Could the prince still be alive? The town devoured it. Half the comments were fear, the other half were hope. The mayor called for calm. The tourist kiosk sold Prince in the Tower postcards again, and a bus full of strangers stopped by the hill on its way to the cliffs. Lena wanted proof. The tower had been sealed for decades, a slumping door of iron bolted with a council plaque that read, "Heritage, do not disturb." The council refused to reopen it, citing safety and scandal. Lena found her way to an unlikely ally, Mara, the archivist with ink on her fingers and eyes that never blinked at old things. Mara had keys. Not the council's, but keys passed down from caretakers whose names never made the town annals. The tower was never sealed by law, Mara said softly, unlocking a tiny hatch under the eaves of the old caretaker's cottage. It was sealed by choice. People prefer a mystery that doesn't change. They climbed through a tangle of ivy and wind. The tower's interior smelled of rain and older things, a sweetness of mildew and dust. On the second landing, Lena found it. A line of fresh chalk marks on the stone, a juvenile scrawl of numbers and a date. It matched the ledger. Then they heard a cough. Lena and Mara froze. It was a sound that held breath and age in the same fold. They followed the cough through an arch and into a chamber the tower had always hidden. The room was small and carefully tended. A single window watched the valley. Books were stacked like loyal soldiers. Someone had braided rope into a little chair. A small wooden chessboard wore deep grooves. And in the corner, wrapped in a blanket, an old man lifted his head. The prince, once the boy with medals and smile, sat with his knees pulled close, his beard gray as the fog in morning. His eyes were a cerulean defiance the town still loved in old portraits. He blinked, as if waking from a long, long sleep. "You found the ledger," he said. His voice quavered but steadied. At last. The story that tumbled out over the next hours was not the tidy tale Greyhaven expected. He had not been kidnapped by brigands, nor slain in a political purge. He had been hidden, by choice and by plan. The prince, LOI, had been young and frightened by the corrosive ways of court. Promises were offered for a simple life in the world beyond pomp, anonymity, a chance to learn the town's true names. The warden, who had loved him like an uncle, took responsibility for one last experiment in mercy. They had brewed a conspiracy, not of treachery, but of protection. The prince had agreed to disappear publicly to keep the crown stable. But the ledger also told of guilt. A ledger entry about one living witness meant the warden had sworn silence to a single person who would remember. When the warden died, the old oath broke like a seam. The town's leaders had chosen preservation, of reputation, of comfort, over truth. Lena listened, heart thrumming with the weight of it. She could run back to her office, print the interviews, demand the council explain itself. She could turn the discovery into a storm that would lift the town's veil and scorch whatever lay under. She had always chased truth like a hound. But the prince's hands trembled when he read the newspaper clipping Lena had tucked in her jacket, a headline loud with possibility and consequence. "If they know," he said, "they will not let me live as I have. I escaped the court for something small, to be ordinary." Mara placed her palm on the chessboard between them. "We can tell the truth," she said, "and we can do it with care. The town deserves to know what happened, but the man in that chair deserves to choose how he appears to them." Lena sat back. The ledger had solved the riddle. The prince had not been lost. He had been concealed in mercy and error. That answer did not feel like victory. It felt like a moral crossroads. When the ledger published its piece, not a screaming exposé, but a careful account with the prince's own words, Greyhaven did what towns do. It argued and wept and reopened old shops and left flowers at the town hall steps. Some felt betrayed, others humbled. The prince walked from the tower and spent the first afternoon on a bench by the river, watching children chase pigeons. He smiled without an audience. He chose a quiet life, occasionally giving interviews about books and chess and how to make a proper loaf of bread. Lena kept her job. She learned that truth was not always an act of sudden illumination, but sometimes the slow, honest unwrapping of a knot that hurt people. The mystery had been solved, yes, but the real work, she realized, was living with the answer. Greyhaven still told the story of the prince in the tower, but now it had new edges, an account of mercy, of secrecy, and of a choice that asked more of people than they expected. People used to say the tower held a ghost. After that spring, they said instead that it had held a man who had chosen life in the shade, and a town that had finally learned how to look.